Hello, it's Tim from Fair Play Now, and another interview, this time with Rachel Matthews of Colchester Council Watch. Now, just to make sure I've got this 100% right, I might be off target a little bit, but what I understand about you and what you do with Colchester Council Watch is you literally go along to either every or most of the Colchester Council meetings, film it all, and then condense the sort of 3 or 4 hours of video down to 15-minute segments and put it up on YouTube. Is that really a fair assessment of what you do?
Almost, except we're a bit lazier than that. We actually most of the time use their footage. We only go ourselves when we've got something to say at the Have Your Say. We're quite lucky in Colchester that they let members of the public come in and express themselves, although they do only give us 3 minutes, but that's usually more than enough. But a lot of the councils live stream their meetings, so local people can inform themselves. But as I say, a lot of their meetings are 3, 4 hours long, and most people cannot be bothered to sit through that. So that's what we do. We condense it into, as you said, the 15-minute episodes.
Let's start from the right from the start. What's your background?
Actually, I'm a garden designer, and then I should have switched into online education to enable me to travel. So I had to do a lot of courses to learn how to set up, one, how to teach adult learners, and two, how to set up an online business. And then I sort of traveled to the warmer parts of Europe and other places in the world teaching garden design. So that's sort of my main background, but it's actually come in quite handy, all those skills I had to learn to do that, i.e. doing videos and learning copywriting skills, all those types of things that you end up doing to have an online business. That's actually worked out really quite useful skill set for what I'm now doing with harassing the local council.
What were your thoughts when the events of early 2020 began happening? And were you aware of shenanigans before that, or I'll put it that way, or did you really only become aware of what really goes on in this world in 2020?
Oh, I was one of the deeply asleep in 2020, blissfully unaware of most things. You realised the financial system was a complete Ponzi scheme, and I knew from my own health journey that the modern medical system isn't great for people, but I didn't think there was anything sinister about it. I was in Spain during the 2020 or the first lockdown, and Spain did it properly, one might say. We weren't allowed out even to exercise for nearly 3 months. There were police patrols every 15 minutes on the urbanisation. We had helicopters going over, patrol boats. You were not allowed out of your house. There were armed police on the streets, searching your bags to make sure you were only going out for essentials. And also the army were there as well. They were not messing around in Spain. So it took me about 3 weeks, I'm sad to say, to really like, something's not right here. And then I started to research because everybody I knew on the urbanisation had gone back to England. I'd sent my passport back in February to be renewed, and a friend was going to bring it back with her. You can guess how that worked out for me. Yeah, my passport got stuck in Madrid airport for 6 weeks, and by the time I finally did get my hands on it, there were no flights. So I was well and truly grounded, and all I had was a laptop and the internet. And once you start researching these things, it's like, oh, what's mRNA? And it's like, oh, no, I don't think so. Look at all those ferrets that died. Perhaps not. Not that I probably would have taken it anyway, but I researched it thoroughly because I didn't know what anything was about. And the more you research it, the more you think I'm not going near that, even if you hold a gun to my head. So yeah, that because I was, as I say, in Spain, I was really brutally aware of just how much control we were under. And when you think, usually the Spanish are a bit rule breakery, they're not known for doing as they're told, but it was such a shock to the system to see everybody complying, and not only complying, if any of the neighbours saw anybody going out, they would denounce you to the police. So, we were going absolutely stir crazy. So I remember sneaking out to go to the beach, and I would put a mask on, a baseball cap, and sort of pulled my hoodie up so that nobody could identify me. I'd be standing behind the gate waiting for the police patrol to go past. Then I'd sneak out, hide behind a palm tree, and then leg it up to the top of the beach in this abandoned beach bar where I could just sit and be outside for a few minutes before I'd have to then sneak back in again. It's like, this is ridiculous. I've never been in trouble with the police in my life, and here I am ducking behind palm trees every time I see one. And, you know, if I'd have been caught without a passport, I'd been in so much trouble. Well, I'd probably been deported. And the fines, the amount of money they raised in Spain in the first few weeks, I forget what the figure was now, but it was exceptional. And they were picking on the English, who they suspected had been there too long. And I sort of fell into that category, but it
Right.
didn't help not having a passport. So yeah, it really brought it home to me. And then in the end, I was ending up like researching for 16 hours a day, all that kind of information that normally I'd roll my eyes at and go, well, that can't be true. I was still rolling my eyes at it, going, that can't be true. But that little spidey sense tickle at the back of my neck was going, I'm just going to research and prove that isn't true. And then every day I did that for about 6 weeks. And every day I would learn stuff, and the next day I'd wake up with such a heavy heart and go, it's okay. You can't possibly learn anything worse than you did yesterday. And then every day I'd be proved wrong. And by the time I got to what was happening with the children, that that nearly did, well, that did me in. That just I had to take a break at that point. I That was hard going, let's say. I'm sure for a lot of people, but you know, I've lived such a sheltered and easy life. I haven't come across stuff like that within my social circle. And, you know, I grew up with loving parents, and that world just didn't exist in my head. And to discover the depth of everything that was going on was very hard going, and also being alone because there was nobody I could really talk to. Although that said, once I started mouthing off a bit on Facebook, a whole load of people within the area, a whole load of expats that I kind of knew. We go to like networking things, but I didn't know them well. One by one, they kept saying, Rachel, come off Facebook, come to Signal, come to Telegram, you need to be over here. And they got me into groups that were more awake. And a lot of the people there were Polish or Latvian, and they knew communism, they knew propaganda, they saw it immediately. So as soon as there was a flicker of wakefulness in my eyes, it was like, come here, dear, let us fill you in. And it was amazing the number of people in that little tiny fishing village that were wide awake. So I was in the right place at the right time with the right people, and I am forever grateful for that.
Your journey sounds very similar to mine, actually. I was probably 90%, 95% asleep in early 2020. And it was only in the lockdowns when you couldn't do much that you had the time to research and start watching various people you wouldn't have considered watching in the past, and reading and looking at things that you wouldn't have done. That was my journey, and it sounds like you were very much similar to me.
Yes, and I'm so grateful I was fast asleep for that amount of time. I've since met people that have been awake for like 20 years, and it's like, oh, that must have been horrific being on your own and seeing all that we are seeing now. So I'm very grateful that I had my little rose-colored spectacles on, was traveling the world, having a great time. I must admit, I was getting a little bit bored with life. So I was kind of like, know what the point is of being here. Not in a suicidal way, just like this all seems a bit pointless. But let's put it this way: these days I'm not bored.
So when I saw your talk in London a couple of weeks ago, uh, I was there recording at the back and at the side, and as you probably saw, and I sort of made the video, split everybody's talks down into individual videos, and um, we had Matt Letitia and Clive de Carl and Richard Vobes, etc., talking, and I put them all on my channel, and they all got sort of a decent amount of views. But I've got to say, I just checked not long before you came on here, and yours the amount of views yours has got, your talk, is 22,000 views.
Really?
Is
Gosh,
Yeah, which is
I think it was
pretty
10
much.
last time you got in contact. How did that
Yeah,
happen?
yeah, I know. That's pretty much as viral as things get on my channel, my sort of relatively small channel. So you're obviously doing something right, and you're obviously doing something that has been resonating with a lot of people, that people are very interested in. And so well done for that, first of all. And yeah, I'd just like to say that if people are interested in this, and is that your sense that people are interested in what you're doing to a really good extent?
Yeah, it does seem to be generating a lot of interest, although I must say you did give that video a really good title, We Scared Them to Death. So I suspect that had an awful lot to do with it. How long they stayed in once I got going is an entirely other matter. But wow, that's a lot of views. So yes, thank you for putting that together. Yeah, I think judging from the comments that we've had since we started doing this last January, I think what resonates with people is that it's ordinary people crawling out the woodwork and going along to their council. We're not the loud, shouty types. We're not the sort of full on in your face truthers. It's just ordinary people. And also being calm and reasonable in today's world, I think that's an absolute superpower because everybody wants to have a fight with everyone else, whereas we just come in, calmly state the facts. We're very well researched. We spend a lot of time with those council speeches, making sure we get our facts right. That's not to say we don't occasionally make mistakes. That picture in the first video that I put with the lithium mine, because it said it was a lithium mine, turned out to be a diamond mine. But we've done our best and they do look similar. So, there's the odd whoops up like that. But the actual information that goes into those speeches, hours and hours of research goes into that. And thankfully, because some of those clips from those went viral, someone made like a TikTok-y version of one of them that went onto Twitter. It's enabled us to come into contact with a whole variety of people that we wouldn't normally have done. So we're able to work with climate scientists and behavioral psychologists. So whenever we're doing a speech now that's anything to do with net zero, we pass it over to somebody like the lovely Ralph Ellis, who's so helpful. Although he must be getting sick to death of whenever he sees one of my emails, it's like, oh no, it's that woman from Colchester that needs my help again. But he's been very generous with his time and making sure that when I pre-seed the information, because as I said, that's my thing as an online educator, I take big complicated subjects and make them very simple, but they must still be with something like climate change. It's got to be scientifically right. So Ralph will come along and like, yes, you've said that in layman's terms, but that's not quite right. So he will correct it to make sure, which sometimes makes it a bit more of a mouthful, but it's better that I am accurate with what I'm saying than understood, if that makes sense.
When did you, well, he told me January of 2023, I take it, that you started
Mhm.
doing, yeah, Colchester Council Watch. But what was the prompt to make you start doing that?
Well, it was being tapped on the back and shoved into the hot seat that was the prompt because I would never have done it in a million years, left to my own devices. What may not come across in the videos and the speeches is that my natural default setting is 90% introvert, and even my 10% extrovert is antisocial. So this is so not me. I'm usually the keep calm and quiet, sits at the back of the room, but that didn't happen. And I found myself in this position. And as I said in that talk, the first meeting, because I was so unprepared, it didn't go well, to say the least. And then when we found out they were going to bring all these EVs into Colchester, because we had seen so many videos on the alternative social media about the fires, we thought we got to tell them because they're not going to see this. It wasn't on the mainstream at the time. So we went back in with a properly prepared speech. But in the process of researching the fires, we discovered that actually the mining of lithium is so much worse than any other form of mining because of the sulfuric acid they use to leach out lithium. And then it can contaminate the water supply for up to 300 years. And a lot of these mines are on the land of indigenous people. So that the types of people that are really pushing for EVs are the one, a lot of, not all the time, but a lot of the time, they're the ones ripping down all these statues about slavery and how we've taken the land from the indigenous people, not realizing this is happening again. Any battery that has the cobalt in, that is the child slave labor. So it became what was just, oh, we're going to warn them about the fire, became this huge thing about, oh my God, these are really bad. And I felt awful because I've got solar and I've got a lithium battery in my office. And then as soon as that speech went out, people then started saying, well, you do realize solar's bad and wind. And he said, oh no, oh come on. And the more we researched, the more we found that none of this green tech is green, and nor does it produce, I mean, I already knew it doesn't produce the level of power it should, having come from Spain with solar to England. I mean, it's just a joke having it in this country. There's no point in using it in the winter months. So that's sort of the journey. And then the actual Council Watch channel didn't come into life until November, because we started watching all of their meetings because none of us had a clue how councils worked. And we wanted to know what was going on. So we just started watching their meetings and making notes. And then I had the really stupid idea of thinking, well, everybody needs to know this, not thinking it wouldn't take me that long to do a précis of their meetings. But yeah, it can take me a day or two to actually make that 15 minutes from a 4-hour video, because which bits do you include? So yeah, that was a bit stupid. But anyway, the channel's starting to get a little bit of traction. I mean, we've got just under 6,000 subscribers in sort of 4 or 5 months. So, you know, it's getting there. What its potential is, I've no idea. But we set it up just for Colchester, and then finding we're getting viewers from all over the place, because as we're explaining how the council works, it's actually relevant to most places in England, because they're going to have similar procedures.
Right.
So that's sort of how it all started.
So how many other groups are set up doing the same thing that you're doing, Rachel?
Right. We've got Thetford, North West Yorkshire, Redmond. No, sorry, Richmond. We've got Eastbourne, Ipswich, and Worthing. I feel I've forgotten somebody. Oh dear. I think there's one more. But yes, that's what, 6, 7 now. And there's more in the pipeline, I think. I've had several emails this last week of people saying, oh, I want to do what you're doing. So, and that's great. And it doesn't have to be video. You could just, one person has a blog that they're reporting on meetings. That's equally as effective. Although at least with the video, you get to see the personalities of the councillors you voted for. And that was one of the reasons for setting up the channels, because we've actually got a lot of really good councillors in Colchester. I mean, I didn't have any preconceived ideas when we started this, what they'd be like. But now I've seen councillors from other councils. It's like, wow, we are really lucky with who we have. And that's in every single party. And I do find myself kind of doing that, instead of fantasy football, I kind of have my fantasy councillors. It's like, if you and you could all work together, we'd have a tremendous council. But of course, the politics gets in the way. And because they're in different teams, they get sort of combative. And you just think, oh, if you lot could just get along. But they don't. And that's why I think we need more independent councillors coming along. And that was the other reason for the channel, to highlight this is what's going on in our council, and hope it encourages more people to go, you know what, I'm going to do that. I'm not standing for this nonsense. And I don't know if it will inspire people. If anything, it's likely to put them off. But one can only but hope. But also, it really shines the spotlight on the councillors. They're getting feedback in a way they don't normally get from the usually silent majority. They only really hear from the ones that are going to complain about anything. But I know they do watch those videos because I've had comments from them, especially when they're in them. So they've got sort of several hundred comments. It's very clear what people think. So it's very useful tool. So the more people up and down the country that can set up their own council watch, the better. And on our Colchester Council Watch channel, I've created a playlist of videos that shows you how to do it. So how to go to the council if you're going to speak, how to film them and extract the video, how to edit. And we got a Dropbox folder, a resource folder with all our speeches in. We're up to 20 now, although not all are going to be relevant for everyone, because we had a few issues with their security guards that we've had to go in several times and discuss with them. So all the tools are there, and we've got a Telegram group that people can join, and we can, all support each other and also share information, because there's no point in reinventing the wheel. If one person gets their hands on something, some useful legislation or a freedom of information request, then we share it with the entire group, and then we can all roll out our own version of those speeches. So it's actually very, very useful to have people up and down the country doing this.
I think one of the mistakes we've made for a very long time now is, well, we've been leading our very busy lives, busy work lives, busy social lives. We've kind of really just subbed out our political will, if you like, and just thought, well, the people who become MPs and councillors, they're very clever people. They're on it, and they can sort out stuff, all of this political stuff that and the running of the country that we can't do because we haven't got time or we haven't got the knowledge. And I think that's really been a completely erroneous way of doing things. And I think these people aren't as clever as what we've perhaps thought in the past. They haven't necessarily got us, the people's kind of best interests at heart. They're perhaps either wittingly or unwittingly working to certain agendas that have been kind of put in front of them, if you like. And I think we need to do exactly what you're doing, watch them like hawks, and when they start doing things that aren't necessarily very well researched, or that are just following agendas that have been put into place by people who perhaps haven't got humanity's best interests at heart, we can say, look, look here, really, you need to sort of look at this, you need to look at this. And I think this is a great way of doing that, holding these people accountable.
Yeah, it is, but also it's giving them support because they are trapped in a system that controls the cogs turn, and they're just caught into it. And a lot of them, certainly in Colchester, as I say, we've got some good ones. They're really trying their best to do the best for people. But the way it's set up, they can't. So, in order to get funding, they have to do X, Y, Z. The officers steer them in a certain way because they want that funding. And also, they've probably all been on these various training courses that indoctrinate them into the system. So, the councillors, I don't know if this is fair or not, but they seem to be more figureheads that take all of the responsibility, all of the flack, and they don't actually have a great deal of control. So when the general public come in and start voicing their concerns, the ones that were quietly thinking at the back, like, I don't think this is right, when you have 30 people turn up, it suddenly empowers them and gives them a voice because they know they've got a gallery full of the general public all thinking and saying what they've wanted to say, but didn't quite have the courage because it wasn't, a popular thing to say. Are we sure net zero is the right thing to do? Are we sure we have a climate emergency that's man-made? I mean, we've certainly got a chemical emergency. None of us would be complaining if they declared that instead. But it's giving them that confidence to show them what the will of the people is, as well as hold them accountable, because we've all been lazy. I mean, no one wants to do this. A few years ago, you couldn't have paid me to step foot in that town hall and do what I'm doing now, but it's necessary. This has happened on our watch. We've all got to roll up our sleeves, put our marigolds on and our waders and get in and clear this lot up, because it's not going to clear itself up. And, we're lucky we've got people willing to be councillors. When you see the meetings and the crap they have to sit through, I mean, just good Lord, it's enough to grind anyone down. And I think it's done like this on purpose, and it's done to make you not question and just follow. And they're all broke. All these councils are in financial difficulty. So, the government says, oh, it's a nice pot of money if you do this. And they go, oh, go on then. And then there's all that indoctrination that goes on. So I don't know how possible it is to sort the system out in the way it's set up now, but I feel we should at least try. And in the process of trying, one, we find our own voice, which is very important, because those of us that do have the eyes to see, I feel we have a moral obligation, a moral duty to try and do something and to at least voice it to give other people a chance to make a difference and do what is right. But if they don't know what's going on, how can they be expected to make good decisions? So we go in as much to educate. We do so without, we don't kind of go in with the attitude like, come on, you've got to say things from our point of view. We're very gentle with our approach, although firm at the same time. So we give people that opportunity to see things from a different perspective that they're not going to get from those council officers. So there's a lot going on. We don't just go in to yell at them, we go in to reach them. And that's why we're so calm and reasonable. We reasonable people to death. It's very difficult for them to come back at you when you're just being so reasonable. So it really is a superpower in today's world.
What I was talking about a minute ago was probably a little bit adversarial, which, yeah, both myself and many others in the freedom movement think that these politicians and local government people, councillors, etc., are basically there to make our lives a misery. So we tend to get a little bit angry about it. But in actual fact, many of them are good people and they need our support in a very reasoned way, like you just explained. And yeah, I think that is another perspective we can certainly take on board, and a highly valuable one, I'd say.
Yeah, you've got to judge it with the councillors. Not all some councils are dreadful. I mean, Stockport. I think that was the one I forgot to mention. Stockport Council Watch, seeing their councillors, they are so rude, calling them climate deniers. I mean, who denies there's a climate, for crying out loud? And flat earthers, they've just dreadful watching them. It really does make your blood boil. And Steve Hatton, who goes in, he is so calm. I don't think I could be that calm with that level of so yeah, it's only because having studied our council for so long that we can see actually you're really trying. I don't agree with a word that's coming out of your mouth, but I can see you're a good person and I can see you're doing your best. So for me, that's a good start. Whether we agree with them or whether we'll ever get to agree with them is an entirely different matter. But at least if you've got a good person to work with, there's hope. So yeah, you've got to judge your council. And try and educate them, even if they're complete, whatever word you want to choose, but at least try and see where it goes from there. I'm going to be interviewing, I don't know if you've seen Matthew from Gloucester. He goes in and absolutely gives them hell. So I'm going to be interviewing him this week to get his perspective. And yeah, some councils do need a good shake-up. You've just got to judge it and see. But if you can reach people, so much the better. If you go in an adversarial way, then you're definitely not going to get through to them unless you can scare them to death, which, either
Yes,
works, whatever works for you.
indeed. But no, I think my point was it's a really valuable thing that you're doing, and these other people are doing, and hopefully many more people as well, especially when this video comes out and other videos like it get shared more widely. Hopefully people in many council areas will think, yeah, maybe I'll do that.
Yeah, because your local council are boots on the ground. They're the ones that are carrying out the instructions from central government. So that's the last cog that you can get in and jam it and go, no, we're not doing that. Net zero. Everything hangs on net zero and 5G. So that's where we focus our efforts. Once we've got the environmental thing of how bad these lithium batteries are out of I mean, we still go in and talk about that, but that for me was like, we can't do this to the earth because so many people are thinking they're saving the planet and they're actually doing far more harm than probably anything else we're doing. So once I'd got that bee out my bonnet, then it was like, okay, we do actually need to focus on the climate emergency and net zero, because everything hangs on that. Everything that they're doing, all of these sacrifices we must all make, it hangs on absolute nonsense when you look at it. And to begin with, I didn't well, I didn't want to go in there at all, but I certainly didn't want to be discussing climate change because I'm not qualified to do so. It was this big, scary subject that I wanted to avoid like the plague. But having come in contact with climate scientists like Ralph Ellis, who've walked me through things step by step, and when you see certain charts that are on the CO2 Coalition website, it suddenly becomes, oh, hang on a minute. Even I can see that as an unqualified person, that if CO2 is going up after temperature rise, how on earth can that be driving it? Especially when there's a 400 to 800 year gap between the two. And there's many other things like that that actually it just takes a little bit of studying, and you can soon see this doesn't add up. CO2 simply isn't a strong enough forcing agent of temperature. It actually can't physically do it, and neither is methane. They do play a part, and yes, some is caused by human activity, but the majority isn't. And when you look at it in the basics, and certainly, as I say, the CO2 Coalition website, they've got so many useful charts. And when you can see it, and when you can see that we've had the lowest levels of CO2 for 140 million years, and you study the work of people like Dr. William Happer, who say, you know, we've been in a CO2 drought, it's important to have more, and you can look at the effects it has on plant growth. The more you look at it, the more you see that actually my gut feeling was this isn't right, and now I know it. Now I'm quite happy to say in public this is nonsense, especially when you've got that big yellow thing in the sky and people don't talk about that as to possibly have anything to do with temperature. Another place to look at is Ceres, CERES, I think it's .org. They've done some fantastic work on urban heat islands and also solar flares and activities. So they write the papers in a way that anybody can understand, that, you know, the temperatures, most of the weather stations are in urban areas. And what I was shocked to find out is there's only 2% of the Earth is considered urban. And when you compare, the IPCC they adjust it to take into account the rural temperature measurements and the urban ones, but they only adjust it by about 10%. When the Ceres team looked at it, they worked out that the difference between the IPCC adjusted figures and rural on its own, it was nearly 60% warmer than rural. And so you think, actually, all these temperature charts we're looking at, they've only been taken from 2% of the Earth's surface, and they are nearly 60% higher than the rest of it. So they skew the data. There's the hockey stick graph, which two different data sets stitched together. There's so much there that you can take into account. And as I say, we've already written these speeches, so but it helps if you understand it, and you don't need to. I mean, I'm completely lost as soon as Dr. William Happer is into his equations. That's me done. But I understand what's written before the equation and after the equation. It's in plain English, so anyone can take the time to read it and understand it. And once you do have that basic understanding that CO2 isn't a strong enough forcing agent for warming, the rest of it falls down very quickly, and you can have a conversation with people and you can ask them questions. In one of the videos, I did a climate quiz for counsellors, and it also asking questions is another way of getting people to think. And you know, there's lots of things like CO2 is cumulative. Well, yes, it is, but it's still not strong enough to force the temperature up. And also, water vapor is a much higher denomination in greenhouse gas than CO2. Water vapor is 90%, CO2 is 60%, 6%. So, you know, it can't do what you're saying it does. And I think when the average person can understand that and takes the time just to look at these charts, then it gives you a lot more confidence going into the council, because you understand what you're talking about. As I say, not down to molecular level, forget that and the equations, but you know what you're talking about to a degree that's enough to get you through the council meetings. So that's all people need to do. And the more people that say it, especially it, as I say, you're not walking in there with, you know, somebody that's looks too out there and like you're going to immediately dismiss as a nutter. That's why I was joking at the event you filmed, you know, it's middle-aged women in cardigans. Again, there's a lot of power in very ordinary people going up and saying this, because if enough ordinary people do, and you're not one of the truthers that's got some eccentric personality, you're just very normal and boring, and you go in and you give them facts, over time you start to reach enough people And then when somebody else with a bit more clout comes along, because we're trying to put on at Colchester a net zero debate, they've agreed to it in principle, but pinning them down on the exact time and date for it is proving a little bit tricky. So once we get that debate with proper climate scientists coming in, I think that is going to be, especially if we can live stream it or certainly video it, that's going to be very powerful to a lot of people. It's certainly, Sandy Adams did one in Glastonbury that Karina and I drove to, and seeing Ralph talk through these graphs, and it was like, oh, I actually understand it. This is, my goodness, how on earth are world scientists allegedly pushing all this nonsense when it's so clear this is not true? Now, I know their income, relies on them believing in it, but it's such an obvious lie when you delve into it, as so many things are, that it's not difficult. That fear I had that I would not be able to understand it was unfounded.
You cut the legs off net zero and everything else falls down around it as well. All the other stuff collapses as well, which so that's definitely the one we've got to go for, I think. And it's really annoying though, isn't it? Because I saw another comment under your video, someone who said they were an ex-councillor actually, and they said, you're welcome to come into council meetings, but not if you're going to be a nutter questioning, established science, and something to that effect. The comment went, in actual fact. And it's really annoying, isn't it? Because you spend lots and lots of time doing research, attending talks, filming talks as I do, listening to videos, studying data, doing lots and lots of research, and you're then called a nutter or a conspiracy theorist, and you're called those things by people who just watch TV basically and follow the mainstream narrative. So it can be rather frustrating, can't it?
Well, we always ask them for the evidence. That usually cuts through those types of comments. Can you actually evidence it? Which climate papers have you read that convinced you that CO2 is the driving force for climate change? And also, when you point out the minimal amount that actually human activity produces, and you just keep pinning them down with questions, and all they'll refer to is the IPCC. And it's like, well, they've never declared a climate emergency. And they were set up from the beginning to monitor man-made climate change, which the bias was baked in at the beginning. So that's hardly, and then look at who all the funding comes in. So, when you ask people for the evidence and why they believe what they believe, then that's just can just start to sow that seed. Well, come on, why do you believe it? Because most people don't know why they believe it, other than they've heard it so many times, it must be true. And that simply isn't good enough. They must be able to evidence it. And that's one of the things we do when we go into the council. Where is your evidence? And they haven't been able to provide us any with other than, oh, well, it's settled science. It's like, well, it's not settled science. It's a consensus, and it's a consensus that's really tiny. It's not the 97% that we're told it is. 97% of climate scientists believe that there is global warming, but only a small percentage, and some do say that, man has contributed, but not that we're the main cause. Then I think there's less than 1% that actually agree with the IPCC version of events. So, and when is science consensus? It shouldn't be. It should be verifiable. So there's nothing settled and there's nothing scientific about it.
Yeah, that's 97% versus the 1% that it really is. It's quite a lot of a difference, isn't it, really? And it's when you sort of burrow down and look into things properly that you sort of realize that the mainstream narrative isn't all it's cracked up to be. It's often driven by vested interests and people with other interests as well, which I won't go into on this talk. But yeah, when you consider that all of the mainstream news outlets, whether it's TV, radio, sort of newspapers, at the end of the day, they're all owned by a tiny handful of huge companies, investment companies like BlackRock and State Street and that kind of thing, and they're kind of controlled in turn by a tiny amount of sort of billionaire elites, for want of a better word. You kind of get an understanding of how the world really works, and can you really trust the mainstream narrative when that's basically controlled by these tiny vested interests who are pushing agendas for their own sort of benefit and not for our benefit.
Yeah, it's actually remarkable they've got away with it. Once you really start to study it, it's like, this is incredible. I mean, who on earth thought that anyone would fall for this? It just shows the level that, it's quite mind-blowing that they were ballsy enough to think they could get away with it, and they have. It's such an obvious lie.
Up to now, anyway, yeah.
It's like having your central heating cranked up and then blaming the boiling of the kettle for all of the heat, and everyone going, "Oh yeah, that's a really powerful kettle." It's like, no, no, it's the central heating. Look, it's right there. But people can't see it because everyone thinks it's the kettle.
Yeah. But do you think people are waking up to the whole climate thing and the other things as well? It's called the Great Awakening. I'm sure you've heard the term. What's your perception on that?
It's difficult because everyone I know thinks it's rubbish. So you're in a bit of an echo chamber. But one of the councillors the other day on Twitter, he sent me a link to Essex had created this climate app. And when we went to check it out on Facebook, there was just like pages and pages and pages of comments. And I recognized a few of the names, but there were so many calling it out for utter rubbish that it was like, there's a lot of people here, and this can't just be our lot. It isn't. That I was even I was shocked at the number of people calling it out for what it is. And yeah, the councillor said, yeah, I think people are beginning to see it now. So yeah, I think it is turning. But what percentage? I don't have a good feel for that because,
No.
Twitter, I'm only on Twitter. I don't really do the others. And it is a bit of an echo chamber because it provides you with the content it knows you're going to want to see. And again, with YouTube, I think the people that are sitting through the videos, we get the odd narky comment telling us it's nonsense, but on the whole, we're already preaching to the choir. So it's difficult to gauge the exact quantities, but I think certainly some people are beginning to properly question it, and I think the COVID narrative has helped with that because once you see one lie, you do, which is my journey, and yours was probably similar. You think, well,
Yeah,
what else isn't true then?
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, everything.
Yeah, I've got a sense that people are more and more people are waking up, whether that's wishful thinking. I don't think it is entirely. I think I've got a sense that things are happening. It'd just be nice if it happened a bit more quickly, wouldn't it, really?
Yes, yes, it would.
So you mentioned the other main thing, 5G, when you can sort of show people proof that there's something out there that might be directly affecting their health, that might be an even better way to get to them than sort of talking about climate change, which is a bit more, that might be hitting people in their pocket. It's not hitting their health, is it? So, so I think that's another main pillar that we should go for. And it sounds like you agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working with Ian Jarvis and going at it from a very practical point of view with the council that, these ICNIRP declarations of safety have been put by companies that don't exist. So they've been dissolved, and you are accepting a planning application with fraudulent documentation. We do slip in, oh, by the way, it does this, this, and this. And there's a study by Leonard Hardell, the oncologist, that shows there is a thing called microwave syndrome, And we do slip in things like, oh, by the way, 30 calves were born blind in a field in Switzerland after a 5G mast had been installed. That was the only change in that field. And this is what's happened. Anecdotal, I know, but we do just keep slipping in the information. It's really Karina's passion. She's one of the other speakers because she is a physio and she's dealt with diathermy machines and all that sort of stuff. So she's aware of just how much electromagnetic frequencies affect the body. So that's her thing. That's her passion. For me, it's the EVs and the pollution. So we've all got our little pet subjects, but Karina is very passionate about her 5G. So that's why she goes in and gives some hell over it. Do what you're drawn to do because you'll do it well. If like everyone keeps saying to me, "Oh, you should run for a councillor," and it's like, no, know thyself. I know I couldn't put up with that level of bureaucracy and inertia. I'd shoot myself within a day or two. It's bad enough having to sit through their meetings on fast forward. So I know that isn't for me. But I know I can do the videos. Online education is my passion. So that's where I'm drawn to do, and I can do more good outside of that council in Council Watch than I could ever do inside it. So yeah, you've got to go where the passion draws you.
Indeed, indeed. So, yeah, we've had quite a good discussion here. Time's getting on, and don't want to take up too much of your time. But is there anything else that you feel we haven't covered? Anything you'd like to add at all, Rachel?
No, not really. Just other than to encourage people to either run for councillor themselves if they've got the stomach for it, or certainly set up their own council watch. And they can get in touch with us on the channel, and we'll help them to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got all the resources there. So it's Colchester Council Watch on YouTube. I'll leave a link to your latest video in the description box below here, and people can sort of check out your material in more detail.
If they're going to set up their own council watch, then you will have to email me because then I can get you in our Telegram group. And then you've got all the other council watchers that can help you, and everyone's got different experience. So yeah, I encourage people to start going along to their council and having a chat with them.
It's a fantastic initiative, and I have to congratulate you for starting it all off. And was it just you on your own who started it, or was there a
Oh
group?
no, there was a group of us that went along to the council, so I couldn't have done this on my own, no way.
Okay,
And we have a lot of help with our speeches from the peacekeepers who know all the legislation and the lawfulness of what they're doing. So they pack the power in our punch. So that's been very helpful because, it's a very good balance of male and female energy coming at things, which I think is also important in this day and age. So yeah, it's great working with them. So we've got a very good team around us.
So, if you're interested in becoming, a council watcher, I would really encourage you to subscribe to Rachel's channel, Colchester Council Watch, and check it out, subscribe. And they've got all the resources there. You can contact Rachel, as she's just said, and she'll sort of put you on the right path, as it were. So, Rachel, thank you very much for your time, and hope this interview gets you a few more subscribers, it gets the information and the word out a little bit more, and most importantly, a few more council watches starting up. So thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome, Tim. Thank you.